Welcome back, Wealth Tubers. As the U.S. presidential election draws near, a growing number of Americans are voicing their concerns about inflation and rising costs. In today's video, we're diving into the latest polling data to see how these economic issues are shaping voter opinions and influencing the political landscape. If you want to stay updated on all the latest insights and analysis, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell.
The sky is falling, or is it?
Ever since the U.S. Federal Reserve began hiking interest rates in March 2022 to tackle inflation, there's been a lot of talk about a potential economic crash. While a hard crash hasn't happened, concerns about it persist. The ongoing buzz about a possible recession in the U.S. has led to what some are calling a vibecession, a general feeling that the economy is worse than it actually is. It's not just regular folks on Main Street who are feeling uneasy. Recently, jittery stockbrokers triggered Wall Street's worst day since 2022 after a weaker-than-expected jobs report. But just a few days later, the market bounced back to its best day in over 2 years. On the consumer side, there seems to be a hangover from what was dubbed revenge spending, when Americans splurged on everything from meals out to trips abroad after pandemic restrictions lifted. Since then, the belief that the U.S. is in a severe downturn has gained traction. This is partly due to the tenor and tone of America's politics and news coverage, which often has a catastrophist, everything is terrible tone. According to the monthly What Worries the World polling, the majority of Americans believe their country is on the wrong track. In July 2024, 63% felt this way, up from 58% in July 2019. Additionally, 56% of Americans in July 2024 think the current economic situation is bad, a significant increase from 43% in July 2019.
The R word.
The American economy has weathered the many storms of the 2020s, like the COVID-19 pandemic, sticky inflation, and interest rate hikes, without slipping into a long recession, at least so far. The last official recession in the U.S. was brief, running from February to April 2020, according to the National Bureau of Economic Research. This downturn was a direct result of pandemic shutdowns. In fact, it's been over 15 years since America experienced a severe, prolonged downturn. That was the Great Recession, which lasted from December 2007 until June 2009, a time when countless people lost their jobs and homes. While things are definitely not as dire now as they were during the 2007 to 2009 recession, some Americans still believe the U.S. is in a dire situation. In April 2024, just over 1 in 3 Americans, 34%, felt the economy was in a recession. However, this is an improvement compared to 12 months ago when 43% of Americans shared the same belief. At the same time, Americans are nowhere near as optimistic about the economy as they were right before the pandemic. In July 2024, only 44% described the economic situation in the U.S. as good, compared to 68% who felt the same way in January 2020, just before the pandemic hit. This dip in optimism comes despite GDP rising and unemployment being relatively low, at 4.3% in July. This is a significant improvement from the record spike of 14.7% in April 2020 during the early, frightening days of the coronavirus crisis.
A shock to the system.
Harsh lockdowns in March 2020, during Donald Trump's presidency, plunged consumer confidence to historic lows around the globe. Then, the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 drove some prices even higher. While these major shocks to the global economy are now mostly behind us, uncertainty remains. As one expert notes, I don't think that we can discount the pandemic and its aftermath and people's feelings about the broader economy. These lingering feelings seem to be translating into action. Some companies have reported in recent investor calls that consumers are pulling back on spending after having splurged on everything from toilet paper during the pandemic to concert tickets post-lockdowns. The persistence of inflation continues to weigh heavily on the American public. Despite a decrease in concern to 33% on average across 29 countries, 50% of Americans now consider inflation a top concern for their country, a 5 percentage point increase from last year. This rise in anxiety occurs despite a significant drop in actual inflation, with the Consumer Price Index, CPI, falling from 9.1% in June 2022 to 2.9% in July 2024. However, it's important to note that the CPI is expected to be up by just over 20% cumulatively since 2020 by the end of this year. Additionally, everyday expenses, such as food at home, are on track to have soared almost 28% over the past 5 years. I think the key thing that has been suppressing consumer sentiment has been inflation, says one expert. The cost of living has been a real drag for people. Inflation is front and center in Americans' minds, especially when it comes to the costs they see regularly, like filling up their car at the gas station every week.
The divided states of America.
People certainly have strong feelings about the economy. Republicans, in particular, are expressing significant pessimism these days. Nearly 8 in 10, 78%, Republicans believe the current economic situation in the U.S. is bad, while only 33% of Democrats share that view. Republicans are also much more likely to be dissatisfied with how things are going, with 76% expressing discontent compared to 39% of Democrats. Additionally, Ipsos U.S. polling this spring found that almost half, 48%, of Republicans worry most about a total economic collapse, while just 22% of Democrats share that concern. This pessimism also varies by education level. A similar proportion of those with lower, 63%, to medium, 62%, levels of education believe the economy is bad, compared to 41% of those with higher levels of education. One of the bigger divides in America right now is educational attainment. As noted by one expert, oftentimes it correlates really strongly with the type of work people do. Americans in jobs that don't require much formal schooling, such as those in car manufacturing or real estate sales, are likely feeling the impact of sectors that are highly sensitive to higher interest rates. Traditionally, the Democratic Party has appealed to workers with lower levels of education. However, in recent election cycles, this alignment has become scrambled, with some of these voters leaning more Republican. If the Democratic Party wants to hold on to power, they will need to secure the votes of many working-class Americans who have been feeling significant economic pressure.
Same country, different experiences.
It can seem as if the divide between the haves and have-nots in America is starker than ever. The cost of living crisis hasn't hit everyone equally. Higher-income individuals have managed to weather the financial pressures of this decade relatively well, while those in lower and medium-income brackets have faced more significant struggles. In April 2024, only 27% of Americans in lower-income households reported living comfortably, a slight drop from 29% in April 2022. Just over half, 54%, of medium-income Americans said they're living comfortably, which is unchanged from April 2022. Meanwhile, higher-income households in the U.S. have experienced less financial strain, with 71% reporting they're living comfortably in April 2024, up from 69% 2 years ago. While inflation has decreased, the cost of everything, from hot dogs to houses, soared during and after the pandemic, and wages didn't necessarily keep up. Additionally, the Federal Reserve has kept key interest rates at 5.25% to 5.5% for now, meaning the cost of borrowing money for big-ticket purchases remains quite high for many consumers. Despite these challenges, 45% of Americans feel more comfortable making a major purchase, like a home or a car, in July 2024. However, this is lower than the 56% who felt the same way in January 2020, just before unexpected lockdowns triggered a short, sharp recession. As with many other issues, there's a divide based on income when it comes to making major purchases. Over half, 55%, of high-income individuals currently feel more comfortable making a big purchase, compared to 41% of medium-income households and just 33% of those in lower-income households.
Still sweating red-hot price rises.
The U.S., along with several other countries, seems to be heading for a soft landing. But now, there are once again murmurings of a potential hard crash. Inflation, which has been searing, is now cooling under U.S. President Joe Biden's leadership. However, in April 2024, just over half, 55%, of Americans reported they were either just about getting by or finding it quite or very difficult to manage financially. This is a significant 14-point increase from April 2022. Whether current Vice President and Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris will face consequences for the perceived economic strain remains to be seen. As one expert notes, she fundamentally still has the same economic record as Biden does, given her role as his second-in-command since January 2021. Our latest election polling reveals that high prices are top of mind for many Americans, with half citing inflation and increasing costs as the most important issue facing the U.S. Interestingly, those who consume conservative media are more concerned about the cost of living crisis compared to those who follow other news sources. Specifically, 67% of conservative media consumers view inflation and rising costs as a top issue, while only 40% of mainstream media consumers share that concern. Whether these lingering worries about inflation align with the actual economic situation or not, it's clear that economic issues will continue to be a major focus as the U.S. presidential race progresses. Currently, Vice President Kamala Harris holds a slight lead over Republican nominee Donald Trump among registered voters, with 42% compared to Trump's 37%. However, recent events, like an assassination attempt on a former president and an incumbent president choosing not to run for re-election, have shown that anything can happen. No matter what unfolds, economic issues will, absolutely, remain a key topic. And that's it for today's video on how inflation is shaping the U.S. presidential election. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to stay updated on how economic trends are influencing politics, make sure to hit that thumbs up button. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications so you never miss our latest content. Thanks for watching, WealthTubers, and we'll see you in the next video.